Cornel West, high-level conversation.
Oh, yeah. Today's a good day. About to talk to the good brother Cornel West, have us a nice high-level conversation. His ideas, he has so many of them.
I had to be governor of California, right? There were no laws against child labor. Socialist movement and the labor movement.
Not to interrupt your wisdom, I got Cornel pulling up now.
Listen, my husband watches him earn your leisure.
How you doing? Pleasure to meet you,
brother.
my brother.
Good to see you.
Likewise.
So I'm a student.
Sacktown is in there a little bit, but Oakland is Oakland.
Yes, sir.
Try to make the world a more joyful, soulful place. That's 19 key.
Make sure y'all there at the high-level round table, man. Come on now.
Oh yeah, I went Legends. Can you hold it? Opportunity in my house.
But America's all about the ego and the flag. And every flag is under the cross. Every flag's under Allah. Every flag is under God. What does that do? That humbles a nation.
I don't want the blood on my hands that comes from the stains of these parties that get elected.
Gotta vote for the Democrats. Black people been voting for these Democrats all this time.
And we try to act like it's strategy, but really it's fear.
Kamala Harris says it. This is a great economy. Quit lying. That's a lie.
We can't rule in such a manner.
And Trump would do the same thing. He say, finish the job. See, that's beyond gangster.
Give us the same grace that you give when it's time for you to vote for white leadership.
But he's my man. Hey, get off the plantation.
And there's a lot of things that we can't vote for. There's things that we can't hope for.
Willingness to think critically and come to conclusions that might not coincide with somebody else.
I don't want to vote Democrat. I don't want to vote Republican.
People say, oh, America's an idea. America's an empire. That's different than an idea.
What do you believe will come out of this moment?
Repair. That's what reparations is.
We with you. Why can't we speak that language?
That's what predatory capitalism is all about. It turns everything and everybody into commodity.
And you telling me you're not gonna fight fire with fire?
Do you believe that you can win?
If you a coward, you ain't gonna be of too much use for good.
There's 19 keys. 19
keys. I appreciate my pops for teaching me how to be a guy.
From a boy to a man, and ultimately back into the natural state of being into a God.
As guys, we're supposed to always move with that higher self. And I had to be able to execute it. Having knowledge is not power, the execution of knowledge is power. Knowledge makes a man unfit to be a slave. Because the only real knowledge you can get is knowledge of self.
This is the highest level. The highest level is ownership. The highest level is power. The highest level is sovereignty. The highest level is higher consciousness. The highest level is when we own our own culture.
Excellence at a very high level. Not eye level. A high level. Like that.
It's time for a high level conversation.
We're here for another high level conversation.
19 keys, and this is a high level conversation.
Tap in with the God.
Peace, family. Welcome back to High Level Conversations. Recently, I've been thinking a lot about Black philosophy and truly the lack of it in the public square, in the public forum, in dialogue. We don't typically have conversations around what this Black intellectual have said or thought or their ideas. So for me, I believe that we cannot evolve unless we're evolving on the great minds that came before us. And I've been thinking about that for a long time because I think about how do we control our future? How do we make a more certain future? And I have this belief that everyone should at least pick one ancestor's work, ideas to propel into the future, to make true. Some of them had theories, some of them had philosophy, some of them built things, but did not see the completion of. So when I think about other cultures and societies, they often can look toward their past and say, I'm building this based on this person that I respect and their ideas. And they get to pull from that and they get to have this honor and this love and this pride in it. And today they take their money and their power and their network and their resources, right? And sometimes they even put it in their name to show that this spirit is still living through my ingenuity, right? Through my works, through my knowledge, right? Through my conquest, whatever it may be. And, you know, coming as a student of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I always looked at the amount of infrastructure he had at the time of his living and how he was focused on building economics, right? But also providing the knowledge of light to a people to show them import, export, right? How to create their own buildings, how to have self-sufficiency. And then in my conquest of younger, as I started to study, I looked outside at different philosophers, right? I was telling my good brother here, Cornel West, about the time that I studied Socrates and actually how that helped me gain my freedom in the case, because it allowed me to understand the thinking and the concepts of strategy and deception and the way the courtroom worked. And I remember suggesting things to my lawyer, and, you know, I was able to understand the legalese of everything that was happening around me and the language of deception, because that's how it feels when I'm in the courtroom. But when I think about society today, I think we lack any real process of thinking, right? We want to argue for the sake of arguing, for the sake of ego, but not for the sake of getting to the truth, right? Which I believe we waste a lot of energy that we could conserve towards solutions. When I think about people that we should look at in our time, I was studying when Tavis Smiley put together the Black agenda for our America. And I was looking at that round table and I was like, look how many different minds can come together of different opinions, whether they from the left, right, center, up, down, whatever it may be. They sat at that table respectfully and conversed in a public forum in front of the culture, right, about what is our future. And of course that was, you know, pre-Obama era of presidency, which I think ushered in this time where people believe things had changed, at least for a moment in time, and then lured us to sleep. Because I think about what would it have been if year after year and year after year we had one of those. We would have continued to have direction and would have gotten better and we would have matured. And that maturation is not a process that we give ourselves grace for, because we think things have to be perfect, even though we're fighting systematic issues that have a long timeline. So when I was watching that dialogue, I was proud to see how all of the elders were conversing with each other and how they had respect for each other, how they would push, how they would challenge, how they would speak to the crowd, right? And that gets me to the idea of bringing it back in our era, but also speaking to the elders that was at that table. Our good brother that we have here is an activist. He's a revolutionary. He's a radical of thought. He's a truth seeker, right? He is a philosopher, right? Intellectual, right? He's already a president of the people, but he's also running for president of the United States of America. Being across from someone with such a great mind, you know, he was on one of my favorite movies, The Counselor West. He got to play himself in the Matrix. That ain't color. I don't know what it is. But now I want to know what he thinks about our Matrix that we live every day, you know, and what is his vision of Zion for us today. And so having and going into this conversation with somebody who's also a professor at Harvard, who was the first graduate of Princeton, of a Black man, you know, to graduate with a degree in philosophy, I think all of these things stem as an important, because the hardest job, the first hardest job, I think, is thinking, right? I don't think we have a thinking society. And if I can accomplish anything about this sit down today, is to get us thinking in the right direction. I'm not looking for agreement. I'm just looking for us to think, because I think a thinking man is a free man. A thinking woman is a free woman. And that ability to think will always allow you to have the resources, right, to gain your own freedom. So without further ado, I introduce somebody who should be in all high regards across households of Black America, but also white America, because this type of thinking challenges all of society, regardless of race. But as he says in one of his books, and it's titled Race Matters. So we're going to get into that discussion as well. And some of this may be new to you, so I want you to grab a pen, I want you to grab a pencil, but more importantly, I want you to open your mind. Let's have this high-level conversation, Kyle.
My brother, man, salute you.
Salute to you.
Salute you there, brother. Man, those are kind and generous words, though, man. You got a rich eloquence, you know. Cicero and Quintilian say eloquence is wisdom speaking.
Yes, sir.
Wisdom speaking. It means that something deep down in your soul is on fire. You're discontented and dissatisfied enough to muster the courage to want to seek truth, but also seek beauty and seek goodness. Then I would also say seek God as revolutionary Christian, but everybody got their own tradition. They could seek Allah, wrestle with Buddha the way the great Bell Hooks does, or other religious traditions as well. But I'm just blessed to be here, man. I'm
blessed to have you here.
I come
Yes,
to
sir.
listen. And coming from Sacramento,
yes, sir. It's some Bay Area energy in the house.
We got an inferiority complex when it comes to the East Bay, when it comes to Oakland.
Yes,
we
sir.
never, ever can catch up.
It's been a black cloud for a long time.
Oakland is so rich, man, producing so many love warriors and freedom fighters and wounded healers. Man, in fact, we have ours as well. My brother Clifton went to Berkeley, and so me and Dad, Mom would come see him run every week.
Yes,
to the Bay Area.
Yes, sir.
So anytime somebody say Oakland, I say, ooh, he or she, they got a jump start in life, man. We've been trying to catch up for a long time.
Yeah, and I think partially of that because so much deep-rooted revolution comes out of Oakland.
Mm-hmm.
Deep-rooted. Like, even if you are passive into learning our history and knowledge, it still surrounds you.
Absolutely.
And it's in the spirit. Even in the streets. So whether you are in the streets of Oakland and you far away from being interested in this, the spirit surrounds you. Yeah. Somebody in your family at some point gave you some knowledge. And that has, some shaping and forming of who you are. So, which is good because then you have foundation, which means that you may go all the way right, all the way left and gone, but you can always be turned around back to this foundation. For those who haven't got lost all the way.
That's very real.
So for me coming in Oakland, that's how it felt, right? You felt as if you were an indoctrinated revolutionary.
See, that's part of the legacy of the Black Panther Party and so many other freedom fighters, Ron Dellums and others, but also go back to Texas and Louisiana. Because so many of the Black folk came out of Jim Crow, Texas, Jim Crow, Louisiana, like Huey Newton from Monroe, Louisiana. His father was pastor of Bethel Baptist Church, Reverend Walter Newton. I think Bobby Seale was from Texas. I mean, that Texas, Louisiana, a little bit of Oklahoma sometimes, zeroed in on Oakland, and Oakland was engaging in a boomtown industrialization. So you get all of that rich New World African Black culture of spirituality and sense of self-respect, having to deal with the racism in sunny California, in those factories, in those workplaces. I think, for example, just that, within 3 years, Jimmy Hines from Oakland and Eddie Hart from Pittsburgh, they were the two fastest human beings in the history of the species. Now you're going to get that two Black men grew up within 25 miles of each other. And the two fastest in the world. You say, dang, what's going on? And of course, that's also manifests in other ways. You got, J. Alfred Smith, the pastor of Allen Temple, right there on International Boulevard, around the Coney National Boulevard. He's my dear brother and teacher and so forth. And the ways in which he was able to galvanize so much of the rich love and courage and integrity of Oakland, especially chocolate side of Oakland. And there's so many other examples as well. And I don't ever want to suggest that either religious folk or Christians or Muslims or anybody else all have a monopoly, because we all in it together. But we do come out of a common African tradition and heritage, even given our different venues, different streams and strands within that great tradition in the modern world. And so, brother, it's just a blessing to be able to talk to a fellow philosopher, because that's who you are.
Man, I appreciate that.
Philosophia, a lover of wisdom.
Yes, sir.
A lover of wisdom. And see, the black twist on that is to connect love of wisdom to the wisdom of love. See, there's a lot of philosophers who just want to be smart and want to be clever. They ain't got nothing to do with love at all. Even Socrates himself, as crucial as he is in terms of getting people to be unsettled and unnerved and unhoused, to interrogate themselves, Socrates never cries, never sheds a tear. Now see, that's alien to the black tradition. Does anybody go through life from womb to tomb and never shed a tear, ain't never loved nobody? See, at your mama's funeral, your grandmama's hurt, betrayal of your friend, you gonna shed a tear. Ain't nothing wrong with shedding a tear. You see? So what is it then? Well, you have to be able to think critically for yourself and get a sense of self-control. And that's Socrates, self-control and self-mastery. But nobody ever fully masters themselves in such a way that they think they're in control of everything. You see, and the reason why you shed a tear is, God, you recognize at your mama's funeral, you impotent. You can't bring her back to life. So all you got is memories. All you got is the love she put into you. Same is true when your friend betray you. You got some memories, but you got to get yourself together.
Yes, sir.
And you shed a tear, that's sorrow. And it might be a tear of joy too, because when you come back around, and lo and behold, you got reason to go far beyond your rationality, far beyond your mind. It's connected to your heart. And of course, as black folk, shoot, you know, we are soulful people.
That gets me to an idea as I'm not sure if you caught this, but recently Terrence Howard had taken the internet by storm. Him and Eric Weinstein. So Terrence Howard had proposed all of these new scientific thoughts. So he has all of these patents in the areas of the metaverse and things of that nature that he's had for years. But then he also created these engineering feats, these linchpins that he created from the sacred flower. And he has all of these ideas that he was on the Joe Rogan show sharing. Now, first he was at Oxford University sharing them, and they didn't want him to talk about this. Of course, they wanted him to talk about acting and things.
Oh, right.
He has a high propensity of, loving science and mathematics. And he's self-taught in these areas. So as he was on Joe Rogan, he did a full, I think, poetic dissertation, about his ideas. And the scientific community exploded. They were mad. They were calling him crazy and all sorts of things. And he was challenging people, right? He was asking the scientists of the world, come together and discuss these ideas with me then. And so Eric Weinstein sat down with him, and he felt very mafia the way he sat down and talked to him. It was a little bit of belittling. But the one thing that I thought about with Terrence, number one, every idea that he talked about from mathematicians and scientists, Terrence Howard knew exactly what he was talking about. He was never left at one point in time, which lets me know he was guided fully by his interest to dive into these subjects. So he never had a linear path, right, of studying and discipline. When those traditional scientists, they have a linear path. I'm going through this discipline. I have to go through this school of thought to learn it this way, from this perspective. And then this word has to mean this because it's connected to this theory. And he took more of a poetic license. This is the way I learned it. This is the way I interpret it. This is the way I use it. And out of that, he was actually able to produce some usefulness through his engineering and his patents. But something you said about, how we are connected from the heart and the spirit of our mind, our gut. When we speak, we animate things, right? We speak in a very animated way. We move. That's our spirit, right? Our ability to create and breathe life into things. So when we speak, we're going to speak with some rhythm. I'm not going to say it in a dry way that you would, because you're speaking only from the mind. I'm speaking from the heart and intuitively through the gut.
Absolutely.
Right? So me giving life and breathing and animating things, I have that license to do because that's part of my spirituality, my ka, my breath. So I think that's something that they don't understand. They love it. It's entertaining to them. But twofold, it comes also with all of this empathy. As we're able to project out all of this spirit, we feel all of this spirit as well. So as we're able to animate and create, the other thing that our enemy use against us, right, is how much empathy and emotion we feel. And they understood that they can be Machiavellian in thought, shrewd and cunning in practice and just get over on the next man for the point of profit over people, capitalism, or rulership.
That's right.
Well, we feel, and unless we discard that part of ourselves, we can't rule in such a manner.
That's
right?
true.
So I want to get, first of all, in your thoughts of how you see Machiavellianism manifest in politics through rulers.
Yeah, brother, you just laid out some very profound formulations, man, because I think you have got at so much of the heart of Black culture, which always is connected to the African cultures, meaning there's a kinetic orality. There's a way of using language and stylizing space and time with an intensity. There is a passionate physicality. So you put your body in it, you put your heart, your mind, your soul, and your intellect all simultaneously. You don't separate these things.
Mm-hmm.
And you do that in order to touch others, because it's all about serving others, empowering others, enabling others, and trying to get others to feel better about themselves, given the catastrophe that we have to deal with every day. But then the third thing is combative spirituality. So if you got a kinetic orality, a passionate physicality, and a combative spirituality, it means you have a tenacity, a fortitude, you got an armor, and you bring all of that together to do what? People think it's just kind of narrow performance. No. It is to remind people of the greatness of a people who had to deal with overwhelming catastrophes and never allowed a catastrophe to have the last word. And then to speak to an audience so that you touch the audience. I was just looking at Kim the other night and the way in which he reaches out and touches the audience. And you think of our great performers, from James Brown to Aretha Franklin to Phyllis Hyman to the Whispers, the Dramatics. They think it's just performance. No. You touch an audience in order to authorize a different future. Now, what Machiavellian orientation is manipulation. It's dishonesty. It's deception. It's deceit tied to your ego. I mean, I was blessed to travel the country with a genius named Bootsy Collins. We wrote 2 songs together on his powerful album, Funk Capital of the World, right? When we traveled, George Clinton sometime come with us and so forth. We always had a prayer right before we go in. You say, now, Brother West, say what you got to say, brother. I say, I'm just saying what James Brown taught y'all 40 years ago. What's that? We gonna give everything we got on that stage. We gonna empty ourselves in such a way that when we come back, we can hardly move, but we would have touched somebody so that they can leave more equipped to deal with life. See, that's how James taught them. And James didn't learn that by himself.
Yes, sir.
You go back to Barnwell, South Carolina, go back to Augusta, Georgia, and go all the way back to the slave ships and slave auctions, you see. How do you keep that kind of tradition alive? So that in that way, you see, when I say we are soulful people, you know, soul is the sharing of a soothing sweetness against the backdrop of catastrophe. So what you do and say and write and how you reflect, seek truth and beauty and goodness, you're trying to be soulful in the sense of you soothing as well as unsettling, as well as empowering the folk. All simultaneously. It's like, that sounds like a Coltrane solo.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Alabama, what is Alabama doing? He's singing about those precious girls that been murdered by these cowardly white terrorists, white supremacist terrorists. He's soothing her, he's unsettling her, and he's empowering us against the backdrop of American terrorism, of lynching, of black bodies swaying in the southern trees. You say, ooh, well, see, Coltrane just doing what black folk been doing. He takes it to a certain level that very few can, you know. But he doing the same thing. And you see it in sports. I mean, we just lost Willie Mays. He was one of my heroes. What did Willie do? Well, he just blackified and Afro-Americanized the baseball field outside of the Negro leagues. In the white leagues, he gave magic and music and depth and soul to the game. That's what Muhammad Ali did in the ring, built on Sugar Ray Robinson and others. So every sphere that we have, we bring that with us in light of our mastery of the craft and technique.
Yes, sir.
You know what I mean? You mentioned Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Every time you mention his name, I think of how difficult it is for people to fully come to terms and fully explain the fact that out of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad comes the two most free black men, Muhammad Ali and Malcolm X. And there's others too. Minister Louis Farrakhan, Silas Muhammad. Clara, of course, is right there with the Honorable Elijah. But the sense of the freedom, and I'm not even talking theologically or politically, I'm just talking about folk who are free enough to say what they mean and mean what they say. Now, Richard Pryor was free too.
Yes, sir.
And he got a distance from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, but he's a free brother.
Yes, sir.
Shirley Caesar's free. So we got some other folk who are free. But two of the freest black men I know are Malcolm and Muhammad Ali. Very much so. And what is it? What goes into that? Courage, self-respect, willingness to explore, willingness to think critically and come to conclusions that might not coincide with somebody else. That's a beautiful thing, man.
With the risk of alienation.
Oh, yes.
The
Being
risk of
misunderstood,
loss.
misconstrued, alienated. Oh, absolutely.
Losing social rewards.
Absolutely.
I think that's the biggest fear of people today.
Yeah.
People talk about counseling and things of that nature, blackballing, all of this. So you risk so much freedom, right? As a black man, you go back to W.E.B. Du Bois, talk about double consciousness.
Oh, yeah.
And in today, I believe that there's even more variables to add into that.
Yes.
Because not only being racially as a black man, but being masculine in America and having masculine thinking, which is ideologically against a lot of progressive order now in media. Media does not present the archetype of the healthy, true masculine man, right, as something that the young boy should break out of his boyish thinking and ways and become, right? And so that's a loss because also we don't have rites of passage into that development, right, as rituals in society. So they're stuck in this Peter Pan thinking, right? And so we use our spiritual nature and our soul to feel as if we're accomplishing something. So we're going to get rhythm. We're going to get song. We're going to get these things.
Right.
But nothing that really requires you to put in the type of work to where you can say, oh, I'm a man because my mind works in this rhythm and I'm able to construct this thought responsibly and hold accountability, right, to, the ideation to production, right? And that leadership or responsibility of managing someone else other than yourself, their livelihood and their quality of life.
Right. That's that heavy responsibility you were talking about. Yes.
Which requires grit and fortitude.
Oh,
and it requires masculine because the hormonal balance of testosterone has to be there so that fortitude of challenge. I take challenge with pleasure, right? That's what's lost. How do we reconcile the ideas, right? Because I hear a lot of conversation about people shifting to the red, right? And far left.
Right.
And there was this study that was done by Dr. Zach. He's a neuroeconomist about the effects of political affiliation and testosterone. So it was a 2011 study, and I believe it was at Santa Clara University. And basically, he did a baseline testing the hormones of these participants where they affiliated themselves as strong affiliation to Democrats, strong affiliation to Republicans. Now, what they would do is weekly, they would give them testosterone shots, right? So they would get their baseline, whether they're 600 points, and as it grows, they would ask them these questions about candidates and their political affiliation. Now, what they found out is that after the testosterone, there was an 11% decrease in those who had weak affiliation towards Democrat, but there was a 45% increase of people towards the red shift, right? Towards Republican ideology. And also those who had strong affiliation, right, to Democrats, or those who had strong affiliation to Republican, there was no change. So if you have this strong ideology towards any parties or candidate, regardless of your hormonal balance, it has no change. But if you have weak, then you can be shifted to the left or right depending on your hormones, right? Testosterone specifically. And one of the things that they had looked at was the ideas towards wealth distribution, right? And the policies around that. And it was stated that those who had an increase of testosterone started to favor the red, right, towards ideas of gaining wealth through one's own merit, right? And that pursuit of challenge of going and get it yourself, right? Versus the idea of the caregiver, right, which is the state, or socialism, which is what I want to get into, or the idea of how people perceive socialism.
Right.
So coming into that thinking of this society has a 50-year drop in testosterone, I believe that the toxicity that exists around the thinking of the masculine, right, is what has been poisoned, because there are not any virtuous characters that is portrayed in the media that gives the young boy or young woman a good attitude and a disposition towards the masculine. And so you have this, what they call a manosphere, right? That is saying that, hey, be a man, right? And those ideas are shifted on the right. The left doesn't really push that idea because they're pushing feminism or the women's movement, right? And progressiveness. So this is where you see the younger generation are not going to vote the way people think they're going to vote, because their ideas, as we talk about double consciousness, this generation has its own double consciousness, and that's towards masculine and feminine, right? As I kind of laid out a lot there for you.
Oh, yeah, you got a lot
throw it.
there, but I appreciate you reflecting on a number of these figures that I really don't know about.
Yes, sir.
I've never heard that study.
Yes, sir.
So you really
I can send it to you.
No, absolutely. You're exposing me to this and educating me on so many different ways. But I would look at it first in this way, which is based on my own personal experience. That, see, I discovered what it meant to be a man by looking at my father, Clifton West.
Observation.
The third. Absolutely. And he had a vulnerability, a willingness for intimacy. He had a toughness, and he'd throw down in a minute. Now,
Yes,
he
sir.
wasn't Martin Luther King Jr. pacifist kind of brother, though.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
He was a Christian, but he wasn't a pacifist.
Yes, sir.
You know what I mean? And I learned it from my grandfather, who, when my mother's mother died on the chair, right on the steps of a white hospital that wouldn't admit her. This was in Crawley, Louisiana, where she was born. Her father, my grandfather, was head of the deacon board, came out with his shotgun. So he could have been part of the deacons with guns, and they had to run him out of the city. That's how my mother ended up growing up in Orange, Texas, rather than Louisiana. And he would always tell me and my brother Cliff and Cynthia and Cheryl these stories, right? So I'm just sitting there learning like, wow, really to be a man is to be somebody who got the courage to be willing to throw down for something bigger than them. But then also to be vulnerable enough and have a sense of intimacy enough for that Socratic dimension, which is that self-criticism. It's the only way you grow, develop, and mature. And then when I read about the great figures of the past, from Frederick Douglass to Harriet Tubman, both simultaneously, man and woman, both of them, courageous, visionary, sacrificial, serving, the least of these, coming out of 25th chapter of Matthew. I said, I see. To be a man is to be willing to learn from a variety of others, women and other folk, but still acknowledge I've got something to do in light of what gifts I have and how do I cultivate those gifts. And then I learned it too, in the music. I have to be very honest about that Delphonics and Dramatics and Curtis Mayfield, especially, and Gil Scott-Heron and others provided real examples for me of how you be a black man with self-respect and with a love for the people, The Panther Party was very influential for my generation.
Yes,
you
sir.
see what I mean?
Yes, sir.
With Huey and the others. Oh, Lord have mercy. I saw those brothers march into my hometown in October 1966 with their guns.
Yeah.
And everybody going crazy. And Reagan don't know what to do. I said, dang, I got to find out what went into the making of these kind of brothers. Because it wasn't a question of ideology and politics.
Yeah.
It was a question of their sense of standing up for something they believed in, and they did it with style. They did it with style. Same was true of the Nation of Islam. They come into the community with those bow ties and sharp,
Yes,
the
sir.
bean pies and
Yes,
selling the
sir.
newspaper. Yeah, I remember just, coming out of the club on Saturday night after slow dancing under the purple light. But I said, hey, these brothers, they got something that I need to learn from. Now, we struggled over I've had some wonderful conversations really with Ms. Louis Farrakhan on struggling over issues of patriarchy and other issues. But it was always an element of my own openness to learn, just like he was always open to learn. And we became brothers even as we agreed to disagree. And most importantly, that love is always deeper than any disagreement.
Yes, sir.
And that's crucial. The same would have been true with Ronald Elijah Muhammad if I had a chance to meet him.
Did you ever get to see him in person? Not to cut your wisdom.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad?
Yes, sir.
No, I never saw him. I never saw him in person. Not at all. I was talking to the Honorable Silas Muhammad, who right here in Los Angeles, he met the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He was 18 years old. And he said, I never felt so much love coming from a human heart as when I met the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. That's what Silas said. I'm just sitting there listening. Me and Brother Malik, Zulu Shabazz, we just sitting there listening to him, you see. And you see, most of the world doesn't see that. They don't hear that because they got all the misconceptions and the lies about the brother and so forth. And it's not, again, you got to agree with everything. Now, first, what was the initial impression of all of this love flowing from him to this young brother, 17 years old? James Baldwin said the same thing when he met the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Remember in Fire Next Time?
Yes, sir.
He says, he had this unique kind of smile. And then he adds, I wonder what it would sound like if he could sing the blues. He said, oh, Lord have mercy. Probably would have been a soft version of Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf. But it would have been softer because the Honorable Elijah Muhammad had a gentleness about him, just from what I can see. You know what I mean? And it was different than the gentleness of some of the other disciples that he had, because he had his own unique temperament and quality. And of course, as a messenger, he had a special status within the context of the nation. But I'm saying all of this to say that all of these elements come into the making of my conception of what it is to be a man. And the common denominator of it is a radical freedom in love, a radical love and freedom, a love of the people, that's seeking the truth and seeking justice in order to empower the people, but also a sense of willingness to grow, of self-criticism, so that you recognize you always can learn from others all the time till the day you die.
When doing my research, it reminded me of my interest in philosophy and studying these different schools of thought. Black intellectualism, Black, nihilism, and Black existentialism, right? And what are these terms and what do they mean? And going down this rabbit hole and developing this art of thinking, right? I think that's a tough thing for most people. It's easy for them to go into theology, to follow a subject that was given to them, but asking themselves to think about something for themselves of what does it mean, man, that's how we get to a great world where we have the minds that are capable of building it. And everybody is not qualified. I think it requires a certain interest. Everybody is not qualified to be the thought leaders of the culture. But popularity is dictating who becomes the leaders of the culture, when that's not it. Because there are many people who are great intellectuals, have great ideas, great analysts, scientists, engineers, but they have zero popularity and platform. And so we have to change this false measurement that fame somehow is a value. Fame is a value when it's leveraged for good impact and goodness and service. But what do we serve and who do we serve? And now is the question. Definitely didn't serve that pocket, that's for sure.
Now I want to live on my baseline. I want to be in a high level club.
Are we low level or high level?
What first promoted the thought in your mind that you want to be the second Black president of the U.S.? What was that thought of inception to say, I'm going to commit to this thought, this idea? What sparked it?
You know what it was, though, brother, is that, I've been running for justice for over 55 years. I'm 71 years old.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm blessing every day, really, loved ones, and the fact just as two Black men still in our right minds, brother, that's a miracle, and that's a major achievement. Because we live in a sick white supremacist empire. That's what America is.
Yes,
it's
sir.
Profoundly sick with decay and decadence and decrepitude, and what's coming at Black folk in terms of the white supremacist bombardment. You're less beautiful, you're less moral, you're less intelligent. You ought to be scared and intimidated and run around laughing when it ain't funny and scratching with it, don't itch. The only way you're going to be successful is to somehow be well adjusted to the injustice of the status quo. So you end up a parrot on somebody else's cage and on somebody else's plantation. Ain't got nothing to do with freedom and love. It's just narrow success, material prosperity. And you say, Lord, that's a sick society. Yes, it is. And here we are in it, but not of it.
Yes, sir.
Fighting against the grain. So that's a beautiful thing. And we have to do that every day. You know what I mean? Because what I'm talking about is also inside of us, all the greed and the hatred and thing. It's some of the white supremacy inside of Black people has to be killed every day. That's how deep the white supremacy is. And what that means in the end then is that I said, I've been running for justice. And for me, that means also running for Jesus all this time. I've been doing it in the cell, on the streets, in the community centers, in the mosques, the synagogue, and the churches. Now it spills over in electoral politics. Same movement. The campaign ain't nothing but a moment in the movement. Same tradition of a great Black people. That ain't changed. When I die, I'm just going to be a little small wave in that great ocean of a rich Black tradition of those trying to tell the truth and seek justice with style and with a smile. Right? But now it spills over in electoral politics. Why? Because the American empire is at a moment now where its decay and decline is so undeniable that there has to be voices to tell the truth about it. And you do that in a context in which now it focuses on the election. The focus is on what is the destiny of the country? Well, you got to come to terms with your past, all the lies and the crimes. And you got to come to terms with the present, all the injustice and inequality, and see what kind of future you have. And so in that sense, I'm just a extension of this tradition of a great Black folk in the context of electoral politics. And so I felt that particular calling that I had is one of trying to tell this truth now in this electoral political context, as opposed to just classroom as a professor, the studio, working with Jill Scott, Andre 3000, a Prince, the great Gerald Levert, who for me is, the greatest soul singer of his generation, but that was all on my album. So, but that's one particular context. All these contexts, even the Matrix, one context, with the Wachowskis, right? One context to do what? Trying to tell the truth. Trying to seek justice, trying to turn people toward beauty, because beauty is very important too. People don't talk about beauty enough. See, philosophers talk a lot about wisdom and knowledge, and not enough about beauty, not enough about goodness, and certainly in a way, not enough about the holy, about God, what it means to surrender one's self to an almighty God. That's humbling. Deeply humbling. That ought to push out any hubris. That ought to push out any sense that somehow you in control and your ego is at the center of the universe and so forth and so on. That cuts against the dominant orientation in America. Because America is all about the ego and the flag. And every flag is under the cross. Every flag is under Allah. Every flag is under God. What does that do? That humbles a nation. That humbles a people. You know what I mean? And that's always been lacking in the country. And so the lies and the crimes can continue to be told and enacted with no accountability, they think. But God is not mocked. You're going to reap what you sow sooner or later.
What do you believe will come out of this moment as you run your campaign? For a lot of Black people, they say, I don't want to vote Democrat. I don't want to vote Republican. And I think what it comes down to now is I don't want the blood on my hands that comes from the stains of, right, these parties that get elected in the next 4 years. Right. Because I think so many people have felt that. I voted before and I didn't like what came out of it. So now I have the blood on my hands, right, of the politician that I elected. And I think this is a time when they say our ancestors, this is what we get the most. Our ancestors died for our right to vote.
Right, right.
But it's funny because we never invoke our ancestors in any other sense. They get turned into, you know, political banter. They get turned into propaganda. But we never talked about our ancestors, you know, right to fight. Our ancestors' right to speak truth. Our ancestors also right to not vote or vote for independent, right? Our ancestors' right to, you know, build wealth and build family and control our circumstances and our environment. I talk about this a lot in the sense that you go back to the early 1900s in this country, leading up to the 1960s. So my great-great-grandfather was in real estate in St. Louis.
In St. Louis?
Yes, sir.
Donny Hathaway.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
My aunt was Margaret Bush Wilson, and she was the first Black woman or second Black woman in Missouri to become an attorney.
And the NAACP
Yes,
too
sir.
later on, huh?
Yes, sir.
That's your aunt?
Yes, sir.
Lord, I knew her son who went to Brazil, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he was a lawyer.
Dang, though, brother. That's beautiful, man.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry to interrupt you,
No,
though,
it's no
man,
problem.
but
Yes, sir.
Lord, no, because I knew his son very well. He went to Stanford and went to, I used to see him at Harvard all the time, and he went to Brazil. And then when Margaret was such a pioneer,
Yes,
in
sir.
the place, people know, but go right ahead.
That was my mother's side of the family, and
Yeah.
they wrote many books as far as, you know, generational, the way they seen America, about their family story, about wealth.
Right.
And, you know, one of the famous cases that she was a part of that my great-great-grandfather helped finance was about ending the racist covenants, right, on housing restrictions.
Right.
And so I believe it was Thurgood Marshall, her, and someone else, they took it and he financed it to the Supreme Court and they won. So I would always think about, all right, there's a start of, you have a consciousness in America as a man. You go into business, entrepreneurship, whatever it may be, but then what are you going to use it for, right? Because when I think about my ancestors, I think about how they wielded their resources, network, and power, right? At that time, that was not something they could have voted for, right? And there's a lot of things that we can't vote for.
That's true.
Right? There's things that we can't hope for.
That's right.
Right? There's some things that we just have to work for. And we have to do it ourselves. And when I look at the lineage of our ancestors, the ones that I have the most reverence for, they all did it themselves. Right? It was nobody that they waited for. It was nobody that they voted for. Matter of fact, if anything, they use it as leverage. Now, I don't mind us creating bills, getting bills passed, utilizing our leverage from our media to our platforms, to our activism. But there has to be some maturation and growth because there's this disconnect between the way that you see reality, right? And then those who actually have senior in activism.
Yes.
Because they're going to speak from the respect of the lineage of this is how we do things. And the youth is like, well, I don't respect it. I'm completely disconnected from it once. And then the other, they grew up in a modern world where that connection of being in a world that is post-Obama. I remember growing up when before there was a Black president. They don't know a time when there wasn't a Black president. So the history of America is a different paradigm, the way they perceive things. So you can't throw the same rhetoric at them, right? To get them uneasy because their values are different, right? So how do we get to a point where, number one, we have to, if we look at culture, culture is a fight of values. There's good culture, bad values, good values. And unfortunately, some people have good values, but we still support a bad culture of bad values, right? So if you take this as a moment that becomes a movement and people say, you know what, with good consciousness, I can't give my vote to left or right. I'll give it to Cornel West, right? But then that means that you abstract so much voting power from Joe Biden. So I was asking a mentor of mine today, I'm like, or a peer to I call him, right? We peer mentor each other. I was asking him, you know, what would you ask Cornel West? And he said, well, how do you reconcile taking the votes away from Joe Biden with the risk of putting Donald Trump in there, who he says represents, you know, violent white supremacy, right? And do you believe that you can win, right, mathematically based on where your race is and projected to be?
Right. No, boy, you got a lot of good stuff there, man. I'm so thoroughly enjoying this conversation.
Yes, sir.
Man, I really do. I really do. Thank you for having me. But one is, I want to go back first to those three pillars that you talked about, because that's the lens through which you talk about voting. See, anytime you just start with voting in two parties, you already got a narrow, emaciated, truncated context. You see, because the question becomes, well, where did just those two options come from? See, in the 1850s, you had to choose between two slaveholders. Well, Frederick Douglass said, I got to choose the abolitionist movement. And he ended up with Liberty Party, which is the third party. But the three pillars that you talked about, Black self-respect, Black self-determination, and Black self-defense, those have always been crucial pillars for our movement. And a lot of disagreement how we understand self-respect, how you understand self-defense, how you understand self-determination, but that's the common elements. And once you lose sight of that, then you end up invoking your ancestor and then still selling out. See, they didn't sacrifice themselves to sell out. And none of them died just for the right to vote.
Yes, sir.
They died because the right to vote was an expression of their self-respect, self-defense, and self-determination. If they in Mississippi and they got a choice between the left-wing version of the Klan and the right-wing version of the Klan, they ain't died to say somehow you got to choose one of these Klan gangsters.
Yes, sir.
No. You see how it gets flattened out? So that, and when you look at our present moment, you see, our present moment is a moment in which everybody's for sale. Everything is for sale. That's what predatory capitalism is all about. It turns everything and everybody into commodities. So that the politicians are for sale. Who's buying them? Big donors, big beneficiaries, big lobbyists, big military. You buy them, get for their vote. They then give them huge amounts of money. And you end up with a political system of legalized bribery, normalized corruption, because everybody's for sale. Now, the challenge of Black politicians is, if they get caught into that, how they going to legitimately invoke Martin Luther King Jr. and Fannie Lou Hamer and Malcolm X when they selling themselves? And so you have to tell that truth. And that's a painful thing, because the whole system is designed in such a way that if you have leaders and politicians who have sold themselves for the highest bidders, but have to present themselves as if they're freedom fighters and truth tellers, they're going to have a lot of work to do. And sooner or later, as Cat Williams pointed out, in the year of truth, that veil is going to be ripped off.
Yes, sir.
And you're going to start seeing, wait a minute, these folk talking about they concerned about Black folk, then how come you're getting all these millions of dollars from the pharmaceutical companies so that you can't support Medicare for all, but still act as if you committed to the Black poor? You can't do it.
Mm.
And we can go on and on other examples. Talk about you tied to a Democratic Party and their major base is the Black community, but they can't push through a John Lewis voting rights bill. The bill itself is weak as pre-sweetened Kool-Aid. How come we got to renew a voting rights bill for Black people every generation anyway? If we citizens, that's Malcolm's point, back in the 60s, he's right about that.
Yeah, fighting for human rights.
Absolutely. So that the truth telling must proceed. But you can't tell the truth if you for sale. That's a noose around your neck. And we end up then with what? We end up with a conception of politics in which it's only focused on the present and the future is a repetition of the present. So any conception of the future is what? Well, you got to vote for Biden. Got to vote for the Democrats. Black people been voting for these Democrats all this time. Look at all this social misery. Look at this suffering. Look at the gentrification of these folk coming in because they got money-driven, market-driven real estate policies and so forth. The child poverty. What is almost 40% of Black children living in poverty, and they gonna tell us this is an excellent economy. No, it ain't. That's a lie. Kamala Harris says it. If James Clyburn says it, this is a great economy. Quit lying. It's not for Jamal and Letitia. It's not for them. It ain't great. You see what I mean? So quit just imitating the mainstream in that sense. But what happens is that you always must stress the three dimensions of time: the past, the future, and the present. So Sankofa, this is what our Black nationalist brothers and sisters have taught us, right?
Yes, sir.
You don't proceed unless you connect with the best of the past.
Yes, sir.
Well, what capitalist culture does and what the market-driven culture does is try to convince Black folk and everybody else, but especially Black folk, we don't have access to the best of our past. All we have access is the dynamics of the present. And the dynamics of the present is money, money, money. It's like Wu-Tang Clan, cream.
Yes, sir.
Cash rules everything around me. They're not rule me, but it's around me.
That's the cultural value.
That's the dominant
hierarchy
value.
of value. Money gonna be at the top.
Money. That's number one.
Yeah.
And just getting over. Survival of the slickest. But that's true for Wall Street. It's true for Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
It's true for the streets.
Yeah. Machiavellianism.
That's the Machiavellian we started with. So the question becomes, well, how do we get access to the best of the past? When you get access to Du Bois and Mary Clyde Bethune and Malcolm X and Toni Morrison and James Baldwin, they ain't talking about selling out. They ain't talking about money, 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 money.
Right.
They're talking about freedom. They're talking about dignity. They're talking about self-determination, self-defense, and self-projection of the best of who we are. So you got connection with the past, intervening in the present for the future to look different. The future's not going to be just a repetition of the present. A future where Black dignity is respected, it's going to look very different than the Black America that we know. Oakland going to look different.
Yes, sir.
Southside Chicago going to look different.
Yes,
It's
sir.
not to say we don't have pockets of it. We do. You all, what work you're doing right now, courageous, visionary, but it's not as pervasive as we would like.
Yes, sir.
Because the love that we have for our people means we got to love them, correct them, challenge them, affirm them, and never allow them to fall prey to wholesale illusion. And if we tell Black folk right now, this is the best we can do, or the standard you all are setting is the standard that all the other young folk are saying, no, that's not true. You all are setting a high standard. And everybody else has to come to terms with those standards, even as you all continually learning and growing and maturing like everybody else.
Yes, sir.
I mean, it would be like us playing basketball. Michael Jordan show up. We say, oh, shoot, he's just like everybody else. No, he ain't.
Right.
That brother setting the standard.
Yes, sir.
You know what I mean? Curtis Mayfield setting the standard. Aretha sets a standard. They ain't like everybody else. They're human like everybody else, but they set a standard. So is true in politics. So is true in economics. so true in spirituality, so true in our relationships with each other and so forth. And all of us are going to fall short at some time.
Yes, sir.
All of us do.
I look at some of the most prudent issues to me. Number one is a complete reformation of what we call culture and what's represented as. But number two, if we look at Black men in America, we have the worst statistics categorically, right? In health, and economics, right? And mental health, right? And all these different categories. But when it comes to politics, it's not even on the agenda as a huge issue, right? I personally know so many Black men living in current crisis at a percentage that's so high, right? That I couldn't pursue another agenda as important without addressing this one, right? Because I see it in my brothers, I see it in my uncles, my fathers, my cousins, my peers, people that I grew up with that I know, and I'm like, bro, this is a crisis. The level of issues, right, is way too high. And
that's real, though.
I've never seen a cancel march for Black men. Never. I've never heard a politician specifically address, issues in the Black community as it relates to the Black man. So what this does is it puts you against the wall to say, okay, well, I got to do this by myself. Now, when you by yourself, right, it gets you to, I was looking at Black nihilism before this. You end up in this space of despair that nothing matters. Nobody's coming to help you. I need to help myself, but do I even have the strength? Because that internal self-resilience and confidence, if that's not there, and number one, when we see it, it's an outlier mentality. So it does represent the greatness, that spectrum, that's the highest standard, but it's an outlier. It's not what's common. The common practice today, right, is despair, falling to their weakness. I meet so many Black men across America. Like I speak at a lot of different nonprofits and Black nonprofits, and the Black men that I speak to, they have such a basic level of need, right? And that basic need is a fathering, right? The lack of fathering. My brother Blue Pill asked me to look up the Moynihan report, right? In the early 60s about the Black families.
65 Daniel Moynihan, yes.
Yeah, but I found some interesting stuff in there as he was talking about the pathology of the family, right? And specifically, he was talking about the matriarch of the Black family and how no other culture in society has dealt with the matriarch, right, as their primary leadership as they're trying to build wealth and build up their society, right? And seeing Black people as a nation. And he spoke on how that was going to create an undue strain on the mother and an undue strain on the father and the children, and how that imbalance of, number one, having, today we got a crazy baby mama, baby daddy culture, which is people that have less resources, access to capital and education, having more children than they have, wealth in reserve to actually take care of and raise.
Right.
And so he was explaining how in every other culture, the middle class have less children. So they're not going to go past like 3 or 4 because they don't want to put an undue strain on the new wealth that they're just starting to gain. Right. And so I thought about that in our community, is that we don't family plan enough. The Black family is not at the crust of, this is the core of our issue, because the Black family then becomes a way to where power and wealth and knowledge can be passed over time. You can't plan in time unless you have a family. I have a son, I teach him, he has a mission in life. He passed on to carry the family name, right? But if I got 10 sons, 3 of them in prison, right? One of them depressed, one of them dead and gone, right? There's an undue mental strain on this one, just thinking about the dynamics of the family and where he fits in that, right? And then when he does get wealth, that wealth is not solely based on his mission of bringing up, but maintaining those who don't have, right? And normally that's what happens when there's somebody who is an outlier in the family doesn't rally around, individualism sets in and it becomes competition. And then there's this cannibalism that's in the family to where y'all start fighting each other comparatively because the needs have never been set. You can't raise that many children and give them the proper amount of time to nurture their needs, so that once they're on their own, then they say, okay, now that I don't have the needs of, of feeling significant, right? Because I wasn't told enough that I was somebody.
Right.
They can focus on growth, developing skills, right?
That's right.
That's where the wealth conversation comes in. What are your thoughts around wealth? Because I know, if you can preface, we're starting off with breaking down your ideas about capitalism and socialism. How can socialism work for us today? And where does capitalism fit in that spirit of, being able to create our own and do for self?
I mean, part of the wickedness of the worst of capitalism is that it puts a premium on greed. And I think greed is wicked. It's cold and callous. It produces cold and callous people vis-a-vis other people who are suffering. It's as if you have no connection, don't need to care, don't be concerned. You see, but what socialism does at its best, because the worst of socialism can be ugly too in terms of repression and domination. Socialism at its best puts a premium on cooperation. Even the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, when he talked about economics, it was what? Cooperative economics. W.B. Du Bois, they don't have the same religion, don't have the same ideology. What was he talking about? Cooperative economics. Even a Marxist like Huey Newton.
Yes, sir.
Huey, what you talking about? Communalism, cooperative economics. What does that mean? That just means that you got to get beyond egoistic greed and selfishness and want to produce, be disciplined, but also share. Also be concerned about others who might not have the same kinds of gifts or energy or gusto that you have. And therefore you're concerned about a community, a us mentality, rather than just a me mentality. Now that's why I don't really spend too much time with the isms in a way. I mean, capitalism is in fact obsessed with short-term profit. You got a fossil fuel industry right now that's so obsessed with short-term profit, they'd rather have the whole planet go up rather than them stop gaining assets of short-term profit. You say, then that's egoism that's calling into question the condition of whether human beings even exist or not.
Yes, sir.
But the same is true with enslavement of us. It was not just hatred of black people, but it was a hatred tied to greed, all that free labor. We producing more profits than any other system in the world. Not just in the United States. Trillions of dollars. Then, that was out of greed. And the average black man and woman dying at 27 years old, they didn't give a dang. Just keep reproducing them or bringing them back in. And of course, in the other parts of the New World, it was really much more importation and reproduction. You see, in Haiti and other places as well. Just let them die off and just keep bringing it. Keep the ships coming. That ain't nothing but greed, man. That's sick at a pathological level. And yet it's been so crucial in terms of affecting us. So what am I saying? What I'm saying, though, is that we need access to resources, food, shelter, and then, of course, quality education, safety. And it's true, if you take jobs with a living wage out of any community, I don't care what color they are, if you have guns and drugs overflowing, coming from the outside, it ain't being produced from the inside. For what? Money, big profit. No matter where it is, you're going to have crime. You're going to have addiction. You're going to have unbelievable contestation and tension. That's true anywhere, you see. But you remember now the anthology that Haki Mahid and Maulana Karenga put together for the Million Man March. Because I was blessed to be a part of that. We traveled all around the country. Ben Chavez, myself, and Minister Louis Farrakhan. And they put the book together. There you got reflection on black men. Different political, ideological, analytical points of view. Because they had Manny Marable, the great Marxist, who died. He was my dear brother. He died at 60. You got his voices in there and all the other voices, got my little voice in there too. But that is a crucial text.
Yes.
Then you got Tavis's text, The Covenant with Black men. Now the new version's coming out next month. Let's see, August 15th. I was just with Tavis 2 days ago, and bringing that back again.
Yes, sir.
Now that's about the community as a whole, but black men very important because we crucial part of the community, the sisters too, and the children too, but very important. So but also I want to mention Elijah Anderson. I don't know if you got a chance to read any book by Elijah Anderson. It always focuses on the plight of young black brothers in the hood and other places, but especially in the hood, and how we've come up with ways of responding economically, socially, what's coming at us. And then, of course, the worst, which is killing each other, disrespecting each other, not trusting each other, not learning how to work together, not learning how to affirm each other. You see. But you got to keep track of the best and the worst. And the older brothers like me, I always had to be reminded when I speak to young, brilliant, courageous, visionary brothers like you of a younger generation. You see, I can't compare you solely to the best of my generation. Because I had the worst of my generation too. You see, you represent the best, but there's the worst.
Yes, sir.
We had the best and the worst. Every brother wasn't Malcolm and Martin. I can tell you that right now. You see what I mean?
But when we think of the past, we go to the best to represent.
Yeah, people the best. You got brothers in the barbershop talking about, Martin and Malcolm represent me. No, Johnson. No, Roosevelt. What were you doing at night? Well, yeah. How many times you go to jail other than police messing with y'all? For the people. 0.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Martin Luther King got 17 churches out of 87 churches in Montgomery, man. That's a lot of churches. Most of the churches held back. Held back. Every Muslim wasn't Malcolm.
Yes, sir.
Wasn't Farrakhan.
Yes, sir.
Wasn't Clara Muhammad.
Yes,
wasn't
sir.
Silas Muhammad, right? Which is not to put the Muslim down. It's just like I'm not putting anybody else down, but it is to say, you got this variety. There's the best and the worst of every generation.
Are we the median of that? Or who are we to be represented by? Are the best or the worst? Or is it a median of
that's
the best and the worst?
That's a good question. I think it's so mixed up though, brother, that it's hard to say. I mean, I would say this, that those who seek to destroy us want us to only be in contact with the worst. And the irony is, even the worst have some best in them. You see what I mean? If somebody had zeroed in on Malcolm Little when he was 19,
yes, sir,
he dead up gangster.
Yeah.
Don't nobody think he had the potential to be Malcolm X.
Yes, sir.
If somebody had stolen away with that brother in the club after he was doing that wonderful dance, Duke Ellington played that song too, he was dancing with Law, and everybody said, this little brother gonna be one of the freest, greatest prophetic figures of the 20th century. They said, get off the crack pipe, and crack ain't even been invented yet.
Yeah.
You see, because even the worst got the best in them. It's a question of whether it's cultivated and accented. And it goes the other way. Even the best, Martin King, he got the worst in him too. He got the worst. You can ask some of the sisters now, he ain't living the straight and narrow life all the time.
Yes, sir.
You know what I mean? So that he got the worst too. That's human. We got to be mature enough to be able to see the best and the worst in all of us. But Martin's fundamental disposition and orientation is so much toward love and service for the people that he sets a high standard. You know what I mean? High standard. Malcolm the same way. Fannie Lou Hamer the same way. But the worst thing we could ever say to young people is to compare them only to the best of the past.
So does impartial of that, when you look at the greatness almost automatically comes with defects, because some of those defects are what makes the greatness.
Ooh, that's a deep point, brother.
So you can't remove the defects, because then you don't get the greatness.
Exactly.
And we don't give enough grace in that understanding. right? When I look at humans, I look at humans.
Absolutely.
If there was one to be raised specifically for the purpose of leading and producing the vision, let's say the one aspect he has is just to come up with the best vision possible, right? He's an analyst, a designer, an architect, a thinker. But in order for that person to be said person, he has to be brought up in conditions, right, that will allow him to be that way. But what happens is possibly because he's over-focused on the manifestation of the vision, some of his humanity is lost, right? Because he believes I only have one point that I'm going to measure myself by, and it's whether I can produce that vision, where goodness and, righteousness may be another man's journey of goodness and contribution, just being a good citizen to society, not harming anybody. Mine is producing this vision, and the things that I need to stay stimulated on that path, right, have to be given so that the end result justify the means. Now, I'm not sure if we will, maybe in the future, but we're not at that level of maturity to look at what's necessary. I look at Donald Trump and many people, Donald Trump, Joe Biden. I see people that say they'll vote for Joe Biden if he was laying up in respiratory tubes. They don't care. People will vote for Donald Trump regardless of any moral issues that they have with him. They can find a way to resolve that within their spirit to say, I'm going to be justified regardless because I believe he's the leader that we need in this time. But we've not been able to do that when it comes to Black leaders. And all I say is, give us the same grace that you give when it's time for you to vote for white leadership.
Oh, that's a deep point.
Now you got to go in the past and think about how you thought about all of the Black leaders and the way that you can immediately resolve this and say, I don't care if this man is old, senile, I don't care if he raised his family, I don't care about none of that. I see the point of his leadership. You can go to Trump base. I don't care about moral implications, convictions. I don't care about none of his past. I see the point of his leadership. So if we're saying that we're at this mature level to see the point of leadership, regardless of character, then we also have to give that same grace to all Blacks leadership throughout time.
Across the board. And when you think about it, though, you see, there's never been a Black man in America who has been directly connected to genocide against people.
Never.
Oh, what is it now? 11,000 precious Palestinians, babies murdered in a matter of months? See, that's Biden. And you got Black folk running around acting like somehow he the best thing since sliced bread. Hey, that's genocide. And Trump would do the same thing. He say, finish the job. You see, that's beyond gangster. We need another language when you talk about rationalizing genocide against a people like that, you see. And yet, you're right, you got folks who, well, I can overlook that. That's just genocide. But he's my man. Hey, get off the plantation. You just tied to your Lord. You tied to your master. And the same is true with the Trump people, and whatever color, but you see the Black folk with Trump.
Oh yeah, no, there's a lot of Black Trumpies.
You say, absolutely, what's going on? Now, on the other hand, it's also true that you can be a truth teller. People say, well, it's true that I acknowledge that Biden is enabling genocide. He denies that it's genocide, which is a lie. It is genocide, but I'll vote for him anyway for these reasons. Well, at least they telling part of that truth and they're moving on. But when it comes to Black leaders can use one word that they disagree with. They remember that for 25 years.
That's a fact.
Innocent folk getting killed with 2,000-pound bombs. I mean, so that your point about the double standards and the hypocrisy is real. But I would say this, though, brother, that in the end, though, it really has to do with what kind of human being you're really choosing to be. Back to philosophia. Philosophy, the love of wisdom. And one of the first things the love of wisdom accents is virtues, not just values. Virtues are much deeper than values because that has to do with something you deeply inculcate in your behavior habitually. And the enabling virtue of any other virtue is courage. If you're a coward, you ain't gonna be of too much use for good. In the Christian scripture, Be not afraid. 365 times. Because God can't use no coward.
Yes, sir.
If you're a coward, the devil just break dancing, smiling. Come on. You who I work with.
Yes, sir.
You see. So then beyond the courage, though, you got to have compassion. Because the gangster could have, and the mafia could have folk who are courageous, and I give them credit. They taking a risk. Very much so. Like even Trump, he can have a bullet fly by his thing and act courageous. And I say, hey, I can identify with that. But then the question, fight. Fighting for what? Fighting against my people. Fighting against poor people. Fighting against working people. No. You got courage, you ain't got no compassion. You see. So you got to have courage with that spiritual and moral dimensions. Then you got the courage and compassion together. We right back to the radical love and the radical freedom. You see. That's what makes a freedom fighter. Bernice Reagan just died just today. She was founder of Sweet Honey in the Rock, one of the closest artists working with Martin King and Snick and James Lawson Jr., who just died here in LA, 95 years old, worked with Martin. You see, Bernice Reagan was a great artistic freedom fighter. She was a protege of Fannie Lou Hamer. You see, she had courage, she had compassion, she had style, and then she's artistic genius. Now, everybody ain't gonna be an artistic genius. You know what I mean? You tell the sisters you want to sound like Aretha, you know, don't hold your breath, but go on and work it out. Yeah. Find your voice, do what you can do, but probably ain't gonna be Aretha. That's all right. Don't worry about it.
Everybody
Most of the brothers ain't
that.
gonna be Luther, you know what I mean? But go on and raise their voices. But they know it's courage, compassion, undergirded with radical love and freedom, radical freedom and love. Then you got something really worth dying for. And that's the history of our people at our best, at our worst.
Yes, sir.
And it's in your generation, and it's in my generation. It's in you, it's in this brother, and it's in me. And the question is, how do we allow it to be manifest?
Yes, sir.
This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. That's Fannie Lou, that's Bernice Reagan. That ain't just a song. Because we living in some grimness and some dimness. What kind of light is going to be shining? The courage and the compassion, the truth-telling, the unsettling, the unnerving, and the unhousing that we started this conversation off with, though.
I didn't get to talk about Black existentialism, triple consciousness, double consciousness enough, right? We glossed over them, but going deeper into it, some of the frameworks talked about Toni Morrison and different people. Some of the frameworks of Black intellectualism, how it grown, right? What's the processes of how do you become a better research in mind, the way of thinking, his ideas about the future, right? What does that future look like? What does Black capitalism, socialism, democracy even look like towards us? The historical relevance that goes into that. He has 3 books, right? And he talks about the moral goodness of leaders of the past and the lack of morality and virtue in the new leaders of today and how they don't stand the test of time to some of those greats in the past, right? There's so many different things that he goes into because, you know, he studied the language, Eastern language. So I wanted to talk to him about a little bit about, you know, Anunnaki and Sumerians because he studied Eastern language, right? Right. He does so many different things. I mean, the man has so many different accreditations and honors, and there's so many schools of thoughts and philosophies that he studied, and he has even people that's on the right that he regularly has conversations with. Right. So I'm like, these are so many different ways to go into that. And yeah, we can have really a whole entire show just built around Cornel West and 19 Keys conversation. Growing up in a time of the Panthers, growing up in a time of being inspired by all these movements, right? It's something that he didn't see from social media. It's not something that he read in a book. These are actually lived experiences. The people that he's talking about, he knew the Malcolms, he knew the Muhammad Alis, he knew these people. And he grew up in a time where in high school, he was fighting for students' rights. You know what I'm saying? Like everything about his entire upbringing, right, is a representation of him having this deep innate idea about the world and him using his courage to fight for it. And I think probably why you're going to get the difference between him and a lot of different people is because he's not a capitalist. He fights vehemently against capitalism, right? We didn't get to go into his finances, but I've seen a lot of articles saying that he didn't have this amount of money or that. But you have to understand, when the black man is fighting in this world, and he's not a capitalist, there's so many opportunities that he doesn't take to keep his integrity. You know what I mean? And there's a way that he's not going to talk. There's a way he's not going to do things. And all of that reserves his integrity. And it shows up when you speak to him, because he's not selling out by speaking to you. You know, we was going to have the congressman on the show, and he didn't want to come on because he figured it was going to be too much of a radical connection. And then he lost office right after that. But it's like, and I don't think he's a sellout at all. I just think that he went too far, right? Number one, trying to be the radical that he wasn't. And when he need to let the people who really do that and represent that do that, you stick to what we can use you for. But then two, not having that courage, which Cornel West talked about, right? As a man, to be able to be the radical that you need to be. But he had misplaced courage in the wrong direction, representing something he won't. He had an idea. Maybe it was his staff. Maybe it was people. I don't know who it was, but his original idea was his right idea. And so many of them, as we talk about double consciousness and triple consciousness, is that we want to stand next to our brothers, but then we don't. And it's the fear that stops us. And we try to act like it's strategy, but really it's fear, right? And, you know, I think it was Rashad that posted that 78% of the things that we fear never actually happen. So what we end up doing is we create this idea of, if I stand next to this, this is going to happen, so I can't do that. All of that was just all in your head, right? What you really could have done was push the envelope, because you lost anyway. So you could have came on my platform, right? I would have gave you the audience that probably would have helped platform you towards your next endeavor, which also would have helped our platform grow as we talking to more politicians, right? And so it would have been this double reward, regardless of you win or loss. So, and then also the possibility of that is you may have won. You may have just got the next push that you needed, right? So what you did was completely turn off all of the possible rewards. Now, you know, you may be fearful of, oh, the political opposition attacking you from the fact that you standing or you going to get an interview for somebody that they may disagree with politically. So what? It's a media platform. You can go interview with anybody. We have to get this fear out of our hearts. Otherwise, man, we can't build with each other. And that's something that we don't talk about enough. We can have cooperation, but not without courage.
Level my baseline. I want to be in a high level club.
Are we low level or high level?
If you could give me a concise breakdown of your agendas, and specifically as well reparations. I know there's a lot of people want to know, what are your plans, right? What is that reason that I'm saying I'm going to put my stake in Cornel West? And that has to be a vision, because in times of despair, you got to give the people inspiration and hope and vision.
Absolutely.
And the most uncertain thing people have right now is the future.
Yeah.
They don't know what we're going, where we're going.
That is so true.
So what does the leadership with Counselor West, right, is the head of Zion, right?
Yes.
What does that vision look like? What's your agenda, and what's your thoughts on reparations? And I think if we could get those, we can close out.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, one is that I've been part of reparations movement for over 45 years. I was blessed to sit at the feet of the great Queen Mother Moore, who's the kind of godmother of reparations. She was the queen. I live in Harlem on 123rd Street, and she was known as the mayor of Harlem.
Yes, sir.
And she passed it on to a whole host of freedom fighters, but Randall Robinson was one. His great book, The Debt, he was the founder of Trans-Africa. He then carried on the reparations movement. Charles Ogletree tied it to Wallstreet, given the vicious attack on black people in Tulsa. Went to court. We lost that battle, but we still were calling for reparation. Spilling over now with Charles Barron and Inez Barron in New York City, pushing through a bill that's still too weak, but it is a reparations bill. Same is true here in California. They're pushing through a bill, very important in that regard. But no, reparations for me is a matter of truth and justice. You tell the truth about how the nation became the nation. It was on stolen land, stolen labor. And that was profit gain unfairly, unjustly, and free from the vantage point of the oppressor. And therefore, when you have that kind of damage, you need some kind of repair. And that's what reparations is. It's an attempt to repair the deep damage done given the violence and the unjust exploitation of people's bodies and labor. So that I can't see how anybody could have an allegiance to truth and justice and not therefore be for reparations.
Mm-hmm.
It could be Japanese, Jews, black folk, across the board. Now, of course, we live in a society that is so sick that it doesn't even want to apologize. I mean, apology is just the weak first step because that's acknowledgement. And once you acknowledge, then you begin execution. And what form does the execution take? Well, I believe that there ought to be a minimum of $250,000 for each black person. And I'm building on Dougherty in the Dear Sister's book, From Here to Equality, which is the most powerful text that I know in defense of reparations, From Here to Equality. It's a co-authored text. It's a powerful text. But people say to me, well, you know, does that mean somehow that you going tribal with black folk? No, I'm committed to truth and justice. I begin on the chocolate side of town, and I want to make sure that black people are treated fairly and justly, just like anybody else. And so that, for me, means that we've got and we don't need any more reparations, commissions, and investigations. We've had enough of those. We need will. We need to be willing to act. We need to be willing to execute. Now, if we don't have the power, then we have executive orders because you don't have enough power below. But if you're actually in a powerful position, you authorize it yourself and see how far it goes. But it's in the name of truth and justice, in the name of a people's humanity, dignity, and labor that has been so thoroughly called into question every generation for the last 400 years. But my program is very much one of abolition. You see, abolition has always been the main theme of the Black Freedom Movement. The abolition of slavery, that's Douglas and Tubman. The abolition of Jim and Jane Crow, that's Ida B. Wells. I want the abolition of poverty. I want the abolition of homelessness and unhousing. I want the abolition of unsafetyness in our communities. How do we come up with systems of public safety so that people can walk the streets without fear? One way you do that is make sure people have the right to housing, a right to health care, make sure that people have basic income, access to resources, then the flourishing of the small businesses. In a capitalist society in which we live, even though 80% of the economic activity is small business, everybody talks about the monopolies and oligopolies because they have the most wealth and the most power. You see? So how do you get them to not just share the wealth, but how do you democratize their power? See, that's the big move, because they'll cut your neck off for that. But they can't cut your neck off of thousands and thousands of folks. That's why you have to have a movement. You can't be out there by yourself. But, and the same is true in terms of being an anti-imperialist. I know this is coming to the end, but see, I want to head the American empire in order to dismantle the American empire. See, we got 800 military units around the world. We've got 130 special operations activities in over 100 countries. And 62 cents for every $1 in discretionary budget goes to the military. So you basically have a war economy.
Yes, sir.
Basically. And the aim is to dominate every nook and cranny of the world. That's an empire. It's not a nation. It's an empire. And people say, oh, America's an idea. America's an empire. That's different than an idea. Yes, indigenous peoples. It was their land. That's what empires do. They steal land, they push people off, then they create their own territories and they expand. That's what empires do. There's been 70 empires in the history of the species going back to our beginnings in Africa. The United States is number 68. And every empire comes and goes. And every empire usually undergoes internal implosion based on military overreach, corruption of elites, impotence of citizens, and looking for a tyrant as a way of restoring order. That's America 2024.
Yes, sir.
Right there, you see. And so here I come along, running for justice, running for Jesus, running for poor and working people, beginning on the chocolate side of town. Say, we gonna tell the truth about this empire. We're gonna tell the truth about capitalism, white supremacy, and all the other forms of domination. And we are going to resist. We're gonna fight back. But what's at the center of it? Not hatred and revenge. It's love and justice. It's courage and compassion. And people say, oh, that's gonna get you killed. Everybody gonna die. You gonna get out of space and time alive? No, everybody die. How do you use your death? That's the question.
Yes, sir.
You see, how do you allow God to use you in your life and in your death? That's the question all of us have. You know what I mean? And it's a beautiful thing to be a black man in a great tradition.
Yes, sir.
Of a great people with a laughter, a humor, a humanity, a style, a smile, and a soulfulness that the world can never fully imitate, even as they are intoxicated by it.
I think that may be the biggest frustration of the entire world. Having to watch magic but not be able to do it.
Ooh, my God. That's a fresh word, man. That's a fresh word right there. I couldn't put it so eloquently like that.
Well, you inspired it. Beyond you running for president, I've been wanting to sit down with you. Great minds require great inquiry, and there's so many things that I can acquire from your great mind. And I think that our generation, younger generation, to look at your work, to start diving into it, whether it's your policies, your agenda, your early works, right? You've been an activist since high school and college, and as you've listed all of these great names throughout history, you have been a pioneer in this Black American story, right? And if we look at some of our best in society, which is our great minds, and we start thinking like a Cornel West, right? And we saying that I'm going to have a way of thinking, right? Most people don't have a way of doing anything. They don't have a strategy. They don't have a philosophy whatsoever towards life. And I think that Black America has to be guarded by a philosophy, guarded by a vision. One of my goals is to reproduce what Tavis Smiley had done and many other people for our generation.
That's beautiful.
Right? To bring that together, because we have high-level conversations, but to have the round table of ideas there for the explicit purpose of what is our first high impact, right? Things that we can do.
Right.
We are in a time of great resource, but we don't have great demand for that resource coming from ourselves, specifically coming from the Black brain trust of America, which should be the ones we go to at any point in time a problem spawns up. Not the most popular platform so we can monetize it, but so we can actually change it. So I want to be able to create that platform, which we're going to do 100%. And I would love to at some point in time, because I cherish your time, and you're somebody that I would love to continue to stay in contact with.
No, but I'm going to give you my phone number.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to give you my email.
Yes, sir.
And anytime you call, I'll come running, because if you have such a forum.
Yes, sir.
Oakland, LA, Chicago, New York, wherever it is, I'll be there, brother.
Yes, sir.
I can tell you that right now.
And I know you have a lot of elders that you know, and I want to put their knowledge on
Brother
display.
Tavis.
Yes,
Absolutely.
sir.
I talked to Brother Tavis.
Please
very much so.
put us in contact, because this is, everybody have their platforms. I don't mind if something gets shadow banned. I don't care about none of that. The goal is to create the impact, right?
Yes.
And we're creative, radically creative enough to figure it out. So no matter what they try to do, they can't stop us. You know what I mean? Because every time they try to stop us, we inspire somebody else to take our place, and that's the evolution.
That's exactly.
So I thank you for being a part of high-level conversations in this platform, and my hope is that people look deeply into your agenda. Number one, deeply when you look at anybody's, I think, politics, first of all, look at their record.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And from everything that I've heard people voice about you, critics, whatever, everybody says you have a deep integrity. And that's not something that we can say is an attribute and a trait that we say about anybody else. The integrity. And when integrity is looked at as a value for our culture, then that's the correct leadership.
Oh, yeah. No, that's beautiful.
So thank you for
That's
being a part of high-level conversations.
That's what they say about you. That's what they say about
Thank
y'all,
you.
though. Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
And it's a tribute to our mamas and daddies.
Hell yeah.
Mamas and granddaddies.
Yes, sir.
What I mean,
Yes, sir.
Come from somewhere, you know.
Hey, man.
Absolute.
I don't mind pissing people off as
No.
long as I lift my people up.
Oh, that's it. That's
So
it.
thank you for
But
being
this
a
is
part of
not
high-level
the last
conversation.
time,
This is
brother.
part one.
This part one.
This part one.
We gonna be connected.
Part 2
now.
coming.
Lord, yes, absolutely.
This has been a high-level conversation with
So
19
beautiful.
Keys at Cornel West. Make sure you get out there and vote for the good brother.
Lord, 19 Keys in the house. Lord, have mercy.
I'm 19 Keys, and this is high-level conversation. Tap in with the guys. So yeah, I enjoyed this episode immensely because you can go learn all about his policies. You can go learn all about his frameworks. You can go through the many different podcasts that he's had. But I think the chief difference of Cornel West sitting down with someone like myself, 19 Keys, is that, you know, I have a level of respect and I feel I am a pupil, right, of these great minds that I sit across from that come from the same value system that I come from. It would be very hard for me to say vote for somebody else, right? Over a brother who has so many shared values and ideas that I have. And I couldn't find one to say, well, don't rock with him because of this, don't rock with him because of that, because I can find many, right, and other people that are running. And like I said, I can't tell people to go vote unless I'm going to vote. And even though I said it in the episode, I think it really comes down to a critical idea of what does the vote mean to you, right? What power does it really have in shaping the world? We have historically voted one party one way, and we have to ask ourselves, do we like the progress that we got from what we've done? Is there another opportunity for a different type of strategy? Do we consider this time to be too dangerous to be strategizing when we should just be in philosophizing, when we should just go vote left or go vote right? Now, of course, the Black community is going to say vote left, white supremacists, get them out of office, too dangerous, Supreme Court, all of these different things. And perhaps they are completely true and founded in a lot of truth. But you can't conflate that truth for you being a representative of truth yourself. Right? You're using the truth to cover up your dirty lies. And that dirty lies that you have and that dirty party you have is why so many Black people feel compelled to resist the voting as a right. Even though it should be clear for you to be able to point across and say, well, these people are white supremacists and represent an ideology that does not favor your values. That should be an easy campaign to run because you should be able to run it based on your tangibles. This is what we're going to do. This is our vision. This is how we're going to help you. We firmly represent, right, your ideas and our policies. This is how we're going to get it done. We with you. Why can't we speak that language? Like the word that comes around him all the time is radical. He's radical. He's radical. He's radical. I ask somebody, why you don't like him? Well, he's too radical, right? But what is needed during this time is Trump not a radical. Trump is the most radical candidate that has ever been put up there. And you telling me you're not going to fight fire with fire? Well, if you're not, and we look at Machiavellianism, right? Using all your cunningness and shrewdness to win by any means necessary, right? He is the most Machiavellian candidate that we've ever had. He will go to the extension list unseen to win. His whole entire ideology from when he was a child till now is wrapped in winning as the final concept that matters the most. When his brother failed his father, right, he came and showed up as the winner of the family, right? When his father had all this expectation, he said, I'm going to win. When he was in military school, right, he would use his cunningness to be cool with some of his comrades only to steal their position. It's all Machiavellian tactics, right? And so how do you not have the fortitude to defeat somebody like that? If anything, you got to have courage. You have to have a handle on your darkness, not to become as Machiavellian as him, but radical in truth. Radical in
in truth. Radical in truth. Radical in truth.
Now I want to live on my baseline. I want to be in a high level club.
Are we low level or high level?